Welcome, Suha and Kangkanika. This is great that we have you both here today on behalf of Center for Youth and India Water Partnership. This is great privilege that we have CEEW here. As the partnership is great, and as well as the kind of learning you're going to share today is we all looking forward to. And with these words, I think everybody can see your profile. And I have decided that instead of reading the profile, we will project it so that people can read. But primarily, let me just say a few words. We're going to have two speakers today. And we're going to start with Suha. She's going to take us through the kind of work CEEW is doing. And as an organization who has been in this sector and providing technical research input and policy driven work they have been doing in this sector. And she heads the new initiative plans and the flagship program for the organization. And yes, Kangkanika has been with us right from the day one of planning this entire fellowship. And thank you for all the support. So here, I think the most important part with Kangkanika that she's directly coming from and relating to the focus of the fellowship. She handles water resource management and policy, and her work is around, she calls it energy water nexus and urban water management, and it's so relevant. She's also been working on circular water economy solutions and wastewater management. In fact, we had a session last week with the Center for Science and Environment, and they were talking about wastewater management also. So good to know. It'll be good to know what kind of how CEEW is approaching the similar issues. And in past, we had 5 webinars actually. So the previous webinars were Water Aid and Development Already Taru, and had their sessions on what kind of strategies and solutions they are proposing for the challenges they see fit to talk about the water sector solutions. So before, in fact, I'll kind of hand over the forum to you. Can I request all the fellows to also switch on their cameras again for a photo op, and then we can proceed for the session with Suha sharing the presentation first, where overall view she's going to provide, and then Kangkanika is going to talk about the water resource sector experience and the work that CEEW is doing. Yeah, can we have all the cameras on, please, here? Yes, so Ananya, yeah, great. Preeti? Yeah. Some of them, they don't anticipate that we're going to ask them to switch on camera. And I actually remember in my daughter's class, teachers keeps on shouting about, please switch on the camera, please switch on the camera. And okay, Preeti, can we have you, Neha? Yeah, great. Okay, good to see you all again. And yeah, so great, good to see you, Preeti, and everybody here, Rikancha, Niharika. Yes, welcome. And yeah, so our job is done, and we pass it on to Suha here. You can switch off the cameras if you want to, up to you. Thank you. Over to you here.
Thank you, Alka. That's a lovely introduction, and good afternoon, all of you. It's very nice to be here. This is one of my first presentations on behalf of CEEW, to be very honest, because I've joined here only in March when the lockdown started, incidentally. And I'm going to go through like a brief presentation on what CEEW does as a whole, and then of course Kangkanika is going to talk about the water part. But the important thing that we want to tell all of you is that the whole crux of it is to look at everything in consonance and not in a siloed way. And we've been putting a lot of effort into bringing all of this together. And one of my briefs when I was recruited was to work with stakeholders to connect these dots and make sure that the policy work, whether national or international, is taking into account all aspects of development and sustainability. So I'm going to just turn on the presentation. Kangkanika and I are here on behalf of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. We can call ourselves CEEW or the Council, both are okay. And we are amongst South Asia's leading policy research institutions, and I'm going to explain a little bit about what policy research means and how it differs from actual research. Um, and that and that's a very fine distinction, because a lot of institutions do pure research, which goes into the academic field. But for us, it's important to, one, take some sort of policy action to base our research on, and then to link it forward to other policy actions that may come out of that. So it's not academic research in the purest sense of it. And all of it links back, but though it uses very, very intensive data modeling, it uses a lot of technology, there's a lot of digital technology, there's a lot of modern portals that we're using, which are, some of it is third party, we license and use them, some of it are built by us. So a lot of dashboards that we have that collate data from a number of government sources, a number of public sources, and then we put it together to come to conclusions that we present. But at the heart of all of this is policy and legislation. So the areas that we have been working in, and these are our focus areas, one is energy access, renewables and power. Of course, these are very closely connected with each other. Industrial sustainability and competitiveness is another portfolio that we're really growing, because the biggest stakeholder, the implementation level stakeholder, is always industry. And it's important that we link all our work to the person who's going to actually do it on the ground. So it does not stay in limbo as a report once you've made it and there is no further continuance of it. Low carbon pathways, this is actually a very future oriented piece of work that we do. It involves a lot of modeling, looking at future scenarios. If this happens, then what will happen, and so on and so forth. So this goes across agriculture. We have it for climate. We have it for geoscience, geoengineering. We have it for climate risk, and all sorts of areas where you cannot entirely see into the future, but we have given many scenarios of combinations of factors that play into things that could happen 10 years, 20 years, or maybe 100 years down the line. Risks and adaptation is linked to, a lot of it is linked to climate change. Water, of course, is a big part of that. Resource security, we would say that anything, and this is something that we'll see in our objective statement, is that we look at everything as a resource and everything can run out. So whether it's critical minerals, if it's energy, if it's water, even air for that matter, clean air, or so what are the risks? How do we adapt to it? Some of it Kangkanika is going to go into great depth about, so I'm not going to get into this very deeply. Technology, finance and trade. Again, this is a part somewhat related to the industrial sustainability, but also the global aspect of international terms and conditions that our industry is subject to. Things like, let's say, the cooling action plan, the AC industry in India and globally, what does it mean? Service sectors for solar in India and abroad, how do we connect to the global picture? Emerging economies, where do they come in? And last year in July, we started the CEEW Center for Energy Finance, and that's it's a center of excellence, so to speak. It's a very specialized body that's housed within us, but independent in its operations. And it looks at the market economics of clean energy, and that is in emerging markets and developed economies, because they have very different market economics. And how do we look at getting funding? What are the risks? How do we have financial instruments? So it's again a very specialized segment of work that relates to moving global money around so that the funding of projects in the smaller countries as well as the low risk developed countries are at par. Otherwise, climate goals will not be met if we don't align the finances globally. So coming very quickly to our objective, we use data, integrated analysis and strategic outreach to explain and change the use, reuse and misuse of resources. So like I said, everything we get it down to something expensive, something expendable, something that may not be renewable for us. And so one part is the research, which is our data. The second part is the analysis, and we say integrated because even when we do a body of research, we connect it back to the other bodies of work that we are doing to come to a common conclusion and to make sure that one part of our research is not conflicting with another part of our research or somebody else's research. And the third part that is very important, and a lot of organizations don't invest in that, is the outreach to really get your message across to the entire range of stakeholders. And that's everybody. That's the government, that's industry, that's civil society, that's media, that's youth, that's women, the actual user groups, whoever they are. And your communication has to be catering to that stakeholders' interest. Otherwise, they will reject your legislation, I would say, or they'll reject the policy. So you need to build consensus. And a lot of our work now is building consensus in India at the state level, at the national level, and also internationally. We were founded in August 2010. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, so it's a big year for us. In August, we have the anniversary. We are also fully made in India, so it's an Indian organization that was made specifically with the aim to have a homegrown think tank that keeps India at the heart of its research and looks outward internationally rather than a lot of international think tanks that bring their global approach and try to force fit that into Indian scenarios, because we are a very, very large and diverse country and one size does not fit us. We are known for three things. One is the independent high quality research. So we are not affiliated with any organization or any point of view or any partisanship. It's purely data driven, the analysis that comes up. We even if we work with the government or industry, etc., we are not funded by them. So there is no conflict of interest of any sort. We also have a huge number of partnerships with both public and private institutions, because that gives us expertise in across the board. And I'll just go over a lot of our projects. You can see the range of work that we do. And the third aspect, like I said, with the strategic outreach, we also make a lot of effort to engage with the wider public, which is citizens, who are the actual beneficiaries of this work, and not keep it restricted to either the policymaker or academia. So founded in 2010, our founder chairperson was Mr. Suresh Prabhu. In fact, is former cabinet minister. Right now, he's India Sherpa to the G7 and G20. Our founder CEO, Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, he is a very, very prolific. He's a researcher. He's a thought leader. He's a global influencer. He writes books. He's a very young and dynamic gentleman, and he has set up this organization from scratch. He was literally a one-man team when he started, and today we are a 100-member executive team, plus we have a lot of interns and such. So that's a pretty big journey to be made in 10 years, but we're looking at the next 10 years as a quantum leap, not just for India, but for us along with the country. And unlike a lot of this sort of research-based organizations, we're a very, very young organization in the sense that our median age is only 27 years. And that means a lot of our people are fresh out of college. We don't necessarily emphasize on age being the differentiator of experience. And we have managed to really get a quality of output out of these young people that would defy actually a lot of popular conceptions of what youth can do. Our board has a lot of stalwarts across industries. So Mr. Jamshed Godrej, Managing Director of Godrej Boys, is the chairperson. Mr. Tarun Das, who was the Director General of CII, is our founding trustee. Dr. Anil Kakodkar, he needs no introduction, actually former chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, and he's on our board. Mr. Ramadurai of TCS. Mr. Montek Singh Aluwale, again another person we don't need to introduce. Dr. Naushad Force of Force Marshal, and two new important people have joined us. They are joining us from next month. We're doing the formalities. One is Ambassador Nengcha Mukhopadhyay. She's been an ambassador of India to Indonesia, Serbia, Lebanon. She's actually got a huge experience in diplomacy, which we see now becoming important in the next 10 years as India increasingly reaches outwards and starts influencing global policy. And we also have Dr. Janmejay Sinha, the chairman of BCG, joining us to bring in the consulting experience. Some recognitions. We have been featuring as one of the top global think tanks since the last 7 years. This year, again, we are the top think tank in South Asia and 15 globally in our category, which is a small think tank. We are not a big think tank. So this is something we have been for 7th year in a row, which is quite a bit of achievement for an Indian organization to rank here. We've also been ranked as South Asia's top energy and resource policy think tank for the 2nd year in a row by this global think tank report. Twice we've been ranked in the world's 20 best climate think tanks, and we are also a great place to work, which I think is a very interesting distinction for a think tank to have, that it's also an interesting place to work and it's not very serious. We are quite a fun place to work at. Some stats, we have almost 300 research projects, over 200 peer-reviewed publications. We also have, this is important, we have 100 plus new databases or improved access to data. So what we said is that we have these dashboards that collect data and make it easy for stakeholders to use as MIS. So whether with the electricity agency or with, let's say we're doing some work on water also, the water resource management tools and so on and so forth that Kangkanika can talk about. This is important because it makes intelligent decision making available to all our stakeholders. We have advised governments around the world almost 700 times, and of course, before the lockdown, we were also pretty prolific in doing seminars and conferences, which are not doing EP. So in last year, we started the CEEW Center for Energy Finance, which I spoke of, and this August, we launched something very important, which is called Powering Livelihoods, which is a initiative for rural startups where we have actually gone to the ground and we have invested $3 million to actually fund startups which had livelihood, I would say instruments or appliances that are powered by distributed renewable energy. And this is part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat effort to connect the grassroots to the actual economic value chain while being sustainable. So there's a mission that we have to have jobs, growth, and sustainability, the three things, the trifecta that never matches, development versus sustainability. We're trying to bring it together and show that it can be commercially viable. So that is something that we started, formally launched, I would say. So it has DRE powered looms, it has DRE powered milk processing centers, refrigerators in villages, and we're trying to see how we can scale up this. Now, I'll just very quickly run through this, some of our major past projects. It will give you a range of the work that we do. So we had done the National Resources, Water Resources Framework Study. It was the first major water study that was done for India. We had also done the first independent evaluation of the National Solar Mission. We had the first report on global governance, which was submitted to our National Security Advisor. We worked with the PMO on the 175 gigawatt target for renewables, the power sector reforms, Swacch Bharat, environmental clearances with MOEF. Importantly, we've also been a part of developing the India Cooling Action Plan, which is part of the Montreal Protocol's work. We're also part of the EPCA of the NCR, and which is why I'm saying that we are tracking the air quality and we're seeing that it's already getting worse coming. We've also conceptualized and co-founded the Clean Energy Access Network, which has 200 plus entrepreneurs who are working on distributed renewable energy applications. We have run a lot of modeling for how India can become low carbon and decarbonize over the next 25-30 years. Two massive research reports, surveys, on-ground surveys that we have done is one for energy access that we have done in 2015-16, and we have just launched, in fact, on this Wednesday, the largest ever residential access and consumption survey, which gave us some very interesting findings after the Saubhagya has been implemented and what it means for appliance purchase or the economic improvement of people at the grassroots. And we've also we're doing some work that is upcoming in interest, I would say, critical minerals, climate geoengineering, the ethics of it, the circular economics of water and waste. And we have a flagship event called Energy Horizons, which brings together all the experts from around the world. So that happens annually. This year it's not happened. And the crux of a lot of our policy work now is JGS, which is jobs, growth, and sustainability. So any policy recommendation that we make, we feel should be able to create jobs, encourage growth, and also have a sustainability angle to it. So that is our metric for measuring the efficacy of our policy recommendations. There's a lot of international projects that we've been a part of. A lot of it is led by our CEO, Dr. Arnava Ghosh, who's part of a number of international forums like the WEF's Council on Energy, the Council on Clean Air, the Environment of Peace. We were part of conceptualizing and strategizing the International Solar Alliance, which is India's first intergovernmental body housed in India. So it's a massive thing that India did after the 2015 Paris negotiations. And we've also been represented India at the for the HFC deal in Montreal Protocol, and we've done the CRMM for ISA and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that we can get into this. Importantly, right now we are advising the government on the G20 because India's presidency is coming up in 2022 for G20. Also do a lot of work at the states at the grassroots level. So power sector reforms in Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, solar power irrigation in Chhattisgarh, climate action plans in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh. So there's a range of activity we do across the states, and so from global to local, all of it is covered. Some current major initiatives that we're working on, power issues, we're working on a renewable energy project performance dashboard that will link all power generation plants to a real-time dashboard where we can see how much RE is generated on a daily basis at any given point of time. We're working on green hydrogen for decarbonization. We are reallocating water. Kangkanika can talk about that. We also have a mission 80-80-80 where we're trying to create a democratic demand for cleaner, and that is important because we are trying to work with people to demand cleaner air from their stakeholders rather than government trying to push initiatives down unilaterally saying that do this, do that. Sustainable cooling, again, India is looking at a massive increase in air conditioner use over the years in the next 20 years. We're trying to see how that can be managed, what it means for us. Electric battery and ambition battery, electric battery and vehicles, again important. I also want to mention the climate risk atlas because India or any emerging economy does not have any way of predicting climate risk. And every year we have the same floods, the same disasters across India. It costs us almost $2 billion a year to just get out of the crisis created by this climate risk. This will probably be the first climate risk atlas in an emerging economy, and that will be with India, and then we are planning to extend it to other emerging economies, and hopefully we'll be able to mitigate with advance notice and predict and mitigate disasters and tail end risks, even like the coronavirus, what happens if something of this sort happens again. Coming back, these are just the areas that we're working on, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions to the organization now or even later. Please feel free to write to me because the whole point over here is that we're working on a range of areas and we are looking at all the support also that we can get from our partner organizations to make sure that we succeed, because all our work is non-profit and all of it is intended for the development of the country. So that's why I'm going to leave this thing. Thank you for your time.
I think thank you very much. So I'm saying hello. I think there's some echo here. 1 second.
So
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
it's better now.
Yeah, I'm saying thank you. Can you share some dashboard links, because that's what I wrote in the chat. Yeah, that'll be nice. And the questions, we can take it later, or anybody has any question to Suha? Or in between, you can type in the chat and or later ask after the presentation when Kangkanika take us through the water sector resource management. Kangkanika, yeah, please, if you can take over.
Yes. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, we can see the presentation here.
So thank you, Alka. Thank you for the introduction as well. And I'm really glad to be a part of the fellowship. So thank you for that as well. Shubha gave a good introduction to what CEEW is and where our footings are and what sort of work we do. Now I'm going to delve a little bit deeper into the water work that Shubha mentioned earlier. Our water work is mainly around water governance. We look at various aspects of it, but it's the overarching factor that always remains is looking at how water can be governed and managed better. So this work is a part of our risk and adaptation work. We also have another piece of work which is going on right now on climate risk and adaptation. One of our fellows from the cohort is also working on climate risk, and another person is working with me on water governance. Another related work, but which looks at long-term electricity water demands and and related water demands, electricity and related water demands, is the work on low carbon pathways, which focuses on energy water nexus. So I'm going to talk a little bit about all these pieces of work, but quickly an overview of what our governance work is about. Like I mentioned earlier, overarching storyline behind our water work is on institutions and governance. But there are also elements of technical studies, stakeholder engagement and participation, and also policy and program evaluation. So, and all of these are not like, most of the projects are actually cut across all these factors. The sector of study that we focus on is also not only one sector, not just irrigation or urban water, but we have also looked at industries at some level, basin level management as well, and also work which is multi-sectoral, looking at all the sectors together. Like Shubha had also mentioned earlier, we try to integrate integrate our research and also the solutions, because we see that siloed thinking is often where we get it wrong at most times. So at CEEW, we're trying, even with our water work, to integrate all these factors together. I'm going to give a little bit of a brief, idea of what sort of work is going on across each dimension, and I'll highlight some of the major studies across each dimensions that have happened. So most of the details will not be in the presentation and will not be able to cover, because these are many projects together. So I would request you to write to me if you want a copy of the report and want to look further. So feel free to do that. So the first piece of work that I want to talk about is the circular economy of water and wastewater. This has actually increasingly picked up in the recent decades, and in India, not so much. So in 2016, we started work on circular economy pathway, and the idea was to look at how we could increase its adoption in the water utilities across urban areas. So the circular economy is nothing but basically looking at how we could reduce water use, reuse the water that could be otherwise disposed, how to recover resources, which is not just water, but also energy and fertilizer, and then also recycle as we go ahead. So clearly it's easy to understand the benefits of reusing wastewater or treating wastewater for that matter. It could improve your ecosystem water quality. Having that extra water, which you can use for other purposes, actually frees up freshwater resources. Plus, we could also add to the current resources that we have on energy and fertilizers. We could have fertilizers from the sludge which comes out from the treatment system. Going forward about this, we have seen that there could be financial, environmental, health, and community-related benefits when we look at these new areas of intervention across wastewater. So the 2016 study looked at developing a structure in which a checklist rather, in which a utility should look at if they want to adopt wastewater management. This includes whether there are drivers for wastewater to be reused, whether there is some stress in the area, because that actually has driven most of the wastewater reuse in other countries. Then also looks at things like policy, regulations, etc. And it's a list of 9 factors in all. One of the interesting factors is about public perception about wastewater reuse, right? Because for even a country like Singapore, which had started reusing water, there was a lot of backlash from the public about the idea of using wastewater. So that's another important factor that we think one should look at. A supplementary work that we did with that study, and the tool which I will share with you, Alka, and also the fellows, is the work on technoeconomic assessment that we did. So we looked at various wastewater treatment techniques across that are commonly used in the country, and we tried, and through the technoeconomic assessment tool, one could calculate the tariff that the utility has to charge if they want to sell it to the industry. So basically, you're treating wastewater and selling it to the industry. Why industry? Because if you see on the right hand side of your screen, you see the 31 rupees per kiloliter is what we got for a 50 mld wastewater treatment plant. What this means is that it is much lower than what most cities actually charge right now for fresh water. Hyderabad charges around 565. So the benefits of using wastewater is also cutting down on your costs. So this tool, actually you can use it for various different MLD sizes, etc., and figure out how much tariff you have to charge, and based on the payback period, etc. Then again, going from urban management to irrigation a little bit. So one prominent piece of work that we have done around institutions and governance is the institutional reforms for improved irrigation service delivery in Bihar. So the intervention was for the minor water resource department there, which mainly looks at groundwater irrigation. At that time, and even now, actually, the state of Bihar has set out a very ambitious agricultural roadmap. So they're talking about increasing the cropping intensity and the irrigation intensity by more than 100% by 2022. But the reality of the situation is that Bihar suffered from and there are still some of the problems there, but there were more problems around how to manage the poor quality of the irrigation infrastructure. The investments continue to remain less, and the systems for financing and maintenance are weak. Even the staff and technical capacity limitations were in plenty. So we carried out this work to understand how Bihar could improve their growth, agricultural productivity, and we also suggested a plan for reorganizing the minor water resources department. What we looked at was through desktop research. There were surveys as well, extensive surveys and field research, and also engagement with key informants from the minor water resource department. Our recommendations were mostly around looking at revised overall targets that could be achieved, organizational restructuring, which focused on capacity building a lot, and looking at data management as well as a part of the organization structure. So better data actually leads to strategic management. So we emphasize the importance of improving those systems. Maintenance and quality, and also looking at participatory irrigation management. Just to give a brief idea of what participatory irrigation management is, it basically looks at transferring functions like operation and maintenance and cost recovery of the canal water system to the farmers instead of the irrigation department. So you basically devolve some of the functions that are done centrally by the government to the farmers, to the people. So in that process, what usually happens is water user associations are built. And this leads me to the next piece of work that we did. This was fairly recent. This was with a consortium of researchers from IIM Ahmedabad, some researchers in Pakistan, and also in Australia. So what we tried to look at is go deep into the problems of the water user associations in Assam and Bihar, and understand what works for them and what does not work for them. So the issue with water user associations in India and actually globally is that even though the structure seems very theoretically fine, it looks like it will work, most often on ground, water users association has had mixed reviews. Some of them has worked, some of them has not worked. So the idea behind this project was to understand why something works, why something does not work. So we looked at 6 in-depth case studies in the India chapter of this study. There was another group working on Pakistan, where we looked at 3 water user associations in Assam, 3 in Bihar, and we tried to understand what the different aspects of structure, participation, and devolution actually contributes to their success. This was also supplemented with a survey of at least 500 households, which across 51 WUAs. In the piece of work which looked at inclusion in particular, saw that various groups, women, apart from women and youth, the involvement of various groups, at least in membership, was quite good when you look at various groups of people. But the involvement of women and youth was still low when it comes to the Assam and Bihar cases. But what is interesting to note that in membership does not often translate into actual involvement, like decision making. So there are a lot of problems in the systems that continues to be there, and the endeavor is to improve the policy that in whatever way we can, so that these limitations do not remain as we go ahead. So this is another piece of work on institutions and governance. Now, this is closely related to the stakeholder engagement work that we try to do at the council, that we have done at the council. In one of the most interesting pieces of work which looks at stakeholder engagement was on urban water and sanitation. CEEW actually convened 5 roundtable discussions and deliberated on various challenges around utility management, role of the private sector, civil society, regulators, and how cities can improve their water and data metrics, and what are the prospects of capacity building. What was interesting about this study was that the consensus that was built across various stakeholders. Most often we know that it is difficult to get everybody on board, but the trust building factor that has happened throughout the duration of the 5 roundtables actually helped build some consensus around what should change in the sector. Then we also looked at, apart from looking at the main stakeholder, the government stakeholders and the the professionals, we also looked at how collective action, which means the involvement of more the consumer side involvement, becomes more apparent when we look at water security and sustainability. This study, which looked at collective action, actually tried to look at why successful interventions and why and how successful interventions could be scaled up, or interventions on water security. Which we often see, right, that there are good practices happening in in some parts, but we often fail to scale it up. So this study tried to look at what are the triggers, what facilitates, and what sustains collective action. This was done through a series of evaluation of national and global case studies. And then we basically looked at their monitoring and evaluation reports. There were some interviews, background information that were shared by stakeholders, and also a couple of major field visits that happened. We saw that for people to come together and to work towards securing a particular resource like water, the presence of threat and opportunity often drives it. It triggers collective action, along with the presence of incentives or penalties. Also, the social cohesion and the networks that are already there also helps collective action to be driven forward. What is important is to have leadership, enthusiastic leadership, along with a critical mass who are convinced with that idea, and a sense of defense for their rights and entitlement. But what is more interesting, and which Shubha also mentioned, right, about when we're talking about institutions as well, but it also translates into smaller interventions, right? Like communication is very important, how you communicate to different stakeholders, and then how you follow up with the coordination. Then also it's important to look at monitoring and accountability. These two components could sustain these stakeholder engagement. Just quickly touching upon a technical study that we did in the past, we looked at various traditional water bodies, lakes and smaller water bodies in the city of Meerut. What we tried to see was what is the status of these water bodies, whether we looked at of course, we did a GIS mapping of the region along with GPS surveys, and we also tested the water quality of around 120 ponds. This was also supplemented with some informal discussions with around 500 residents. What was interesting and actually quite disappointing to see was that 50% of the water bodies were severely polluted. This study, of course, linked to what should be done to improve all these, the problems that we had. And of course, one of the major factors that we need to change is to first of all, map the availability of these, water bodies, and to have some control over the reclamation, and which is very rampant in most cities. You reclaim the land to, build infrastructure. While it's understood that these bodies actually help towards flood mitigation, also towards creating an ecosystem, etc. So this was one technical study where we looked at the water quality. Currently, we are working on reallocation of water for growth. It's going to be published soon, and I'll be happy to share it with Alka so that all of you can also have a look at it, where we are looking at how efficient irrigation practices can actually help save water, and how much water, which can be reallocated for other sectors and which could, translate towards better water productivity. Now, about policy schemes and evaluation, one of the work that Shuva mentioned earlier was about these pieces of evaluation that we did for different policies, and one of them was looking at Swacch Bharat. This was done for the PM office. We looked at how interventions could be improved by looking at different newer factors of management. One, it was important to look at behavior, look at capacity of the institutions, the infrastructure and how to maintain it, and also the management. So we continue to look at like current policies and evaluation and programs that are currently in place for the country. Right now, we are looking at evaluation of the Jal Jeevan mission, the water security planning, which is an important component across several on-ground programs, and how these the policy coherence across these programs could be better. Now, just quickly touching upon our climate, energy, water nexus work as well. One of the first outputs that we had on this work was simply trying to understand how much water different fuels, electricity production from different fuels actually consume and withdraw. So what we did was, that was in around 2016, where we looked at various thermal power plants in the country, trying to cover almost 100% of different fuels. And we looked at, we went in detail into the functioning of the thermal power plant and how much water they use. As a result, we were able to build this index of water coefficients for India, which was specific. And that has fed into our long-term scenario building exercise that we continue to do right now. This is one of the pieces of work that I want to talk about right now, which is looking at shared socioeconomic pathways. SSP, in abbreviation, is basically a concept where it looks at different growth patterns for the country. So just to give a the brief idea, SSP1, for instance, focuses on a renewable pathway. SSP2 is the BAU scenario. SSP3 looks at nuclear energy, focuses more on nuclear energy. 4 on low carbon pathways, and 5 on coal-based electricity. So what we assume when we go ahead with the study is we don't know how India is going to grow. So we look at these 5 scenarios to understand how the water use, because of certain decisions that happen because of the growth pattern, changes, how the water consumption and withdrawals would change. You can see here that, the SSP4 scenario, the water withdrawals become quite high as you go into 2070, This is for the entire country. Here what happens is the low carbon pathways, which is renewable, hydro and nuclear, especially hydro and nuclear, consume a lot, withdraw a lot of water. They do not necessarily consume a lot of water, but they withdraw a lot of water. So this could potentially help India understand that if India wants to take care of its water resources, maybe it should also have more informed understanding of what their energy mix should be like as we go ahead. Additionally, we are also trying to look at various other cooling alternatives for cooling, like until a long time back, most of the thermal power plants which was running on coal used to use once-through cooling, where you take a huge amount of water from the river body, from the water body, and just use the water for cooling once and you leave it back to the river systems. However, water consumption, water that is evaporated or that is consumed in the process is much low. Now the government has mandated thermal power plants to move towards cooling towers, where the withdrawals are low, but there is a higher consumption. But overall, it's a better choice than once through. Dry cooling, on the other hand, actually has zero withdrawal and consumption. It works on an air-cooled condenser technique. But there are some trade-offs, like the production efficiency becomes low and the cost of technology is higher. So this is some of the piece of work that is ongoing right now. We're trying to look at alternative sources of cooling, not just dry cooling, but also wastewater, how wastewater could come in. There are mixed experiences around the country, so that those developments are quite interesting to note. One of the pieces of work that we have recently worked on is looking at policy coherence. How, when you design policies for energy, one should also look at the implications of water. We wanted to see how India is faring in those terms. So this piece of work actually points to particularly that. So this is mostly the brief of what's happening at CEEW on water governance and energy water nexus. I'll be happy to answer questions. I'll be happy to send across reports if you want. My email ID is here. Both Shubha and I are happy to help you with this.
Yeah,
And
that's
answer
very, very precise. Thank you. I think that gives a lot of insight into what kind of work you are doing. And yes, I'm opening this for the questions from fellow, but I think I like to start with few questions, if that's not a problem. One is in your presentation, if when you'll share with us, you can just list down the publications links and that they would like to, you want them to refer to. That'll be really nice. One is that. And second is the very interesting work that you have been working on different issues of, as you said, on the water governance policy, energy nexus. And this particular question is to understand that the kind of work that you're doing, you pick up, what's the basis of picking up, this is the sector I want to work on, this is the kind of issues I want to work on, and where this all feed to. So in the policy scenario of the country, or in how it builds up to you and as it builds up for the country also, the kind of knowledge base you create.
Sure. So mainly we look at strategic issues of strategic interest, which the country, where probably in the water sector, as we would often see, the advances in a lot of other countries is much higher than what we have looked at in India. So right now, for instance, we are looking at issues of circular economy, which is quite developed in foreign countries, but not. So either it has to be something of strategic interest or something that we need to do mandatorily. So there were case studies that we tried to do on Delhi, and we saw that until and unless we look at a more circular economic pathways, sustainability might be difficult. Similarly, that the work that we are trying to do around data, which actually is currently work in progress, is because we know that as you go, it might not be of strategic interest right now, but it is a requirement. Because when you talk about data, currently we do not know how much water we use in our houses, in the irrigation, in the farms. So how to take that to a position where it is of strategic interest is also something that we try to do. So mainly looking at sustainability of the sources and also strategic interest. Like a Jal Jeevan mission is something that we're looking at because it is strategic to the government right now. They are looking at providing 24/7, they're providing water supply to all households, right? So that's why we are looking at that. So mostly the decisions are on basis of these two things.
Great. And can you also tell our fellows that the kind of work that you have been doing or you intend to do in future, what is the prospects for them for to be in, get involved in the organization or with the kind of work that you are doing?
Yeah, so I mean, between the two of us, we have talked about the entirety of work that there is in CEEW. Definitely there is prospect. We keep a lookout for new talents and new people who are interested to work in sustainability, especially people who come in with a strong passion for this sort of work. So definitely we'd be happy to guide you through the process. If you want to, you can write to us if you're interested in any of the sector, and we can see how you can engage with us. Shubha, you want to add to this?
I just want to add that we need many different types of skill sets, so it doesn't have to be any specific interest. So it can be a researcher, it can be a policy advocate, it can even be somebody who's good at communication or negotiation. We do a lot of negotiations, like I said, at both international and national forums, which is a pure, like we understand the legislation and the priorities of each country, and you have to come to a point of consensus, and that's quite a bit of a legal, like a techno-legal sort of work. So there's a whole range of things that we can do, and also that we are growing, and so we have been actually recruiting pretty intensely the last couple of years. So it's a trajectory that requires talent. So we are keen.
Yeah. So fellows,
I would encourage, if you're interested, to go through the work that we are doing, and connect to the researchers. And it's like Shubha said, it's not about the particular subject, but also your skill sets that would be really helpful for us.
I think that is very, very important point that you made, and in fact in the fellowship, a lot of emphasis is there on how do you really conceptualize and put together your work, and through blog or through case study and through photo narratives and a report. The whole purpose of doing that is just for them to understand what exactly how you really research, but how do you really put it together is also equally important. So that's another very important point. So we will come to the fellows question. You can raise hand, and we're just going to Veena ji, and then fellows you can raise hand and I'll come to you. Yeah, Veena ji, please.
Yes. Thank you, Kangkanika and Shuva, for very comprehensive presentation and the journey of CEEW.
Hello. Veena ji, some network issue. So we'll just come to Veena ji in a while. Niharika, you can ask the question then.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, good evening.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask a question. Like you said that you conduct interviews with the stakeholders, and then before that you usually do mapping of the stakeholders, like for a particular city, and then go for collecting secondary data from them. So I wanted to ask a question, like how do you approach them? Because normally stakeholders are not interested in like sharing the government data with you. Because as a part of this fellowship itself, I conducted a survey in my city and interviews with the stakeholders of my city. So it was very, a hectic task for me to ask them for the data, which is very, which is genuine and which is correct, because they usually don't share the government data with you, and that is which is up to date, like 2020 data. So how do you tackle with this? Or I had a suggestion, like for like before going to any city for a data, I thought that why don't we file a RTI to get data, like correct data from them, because usually they don't share the data which is correct. So how do you tackle with this kind of problem, because this is a very big issue while doing a project.
No, totally. I totally understand the challenge. It's been quite difficult to get data which is not in the public domain already. I mean, of course. I what I have seen is with government officials, the more you are able to convince them, or at least if that's how you talk about your project, like how it's going to benefit the utility or the department. Sometimes the interests might peak because of that, but generally I think data transparency is a big issue, and it's important. It's getting important for us to look at alternative sources right now, like the okay, just a just quick anecdote I wanted to share. My friend who is doing a PhD on energy access, she was waiting for the NSSO data, which she did not get. So recently, she saw the energy access work, and it sort of saved her so much time. So I think we also have to start looking out for alternate source of data going ahead, and how to collect data at low cost, these are questions and I don't have an answer, but definitely sometimes it's very difficult to get data from the government sources. And in the water sector, it has been a big problem.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Can I supplement now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, Kangkanika, actually, I was talking. Now the question has come to the data, and I'm coming to that only because I know CEEW work on circular economy pathways in 2016, and I also attended several meetings, and then as a one of his stakeholder when we were trying through different embassy and different municipal government for the resource recovery mechanism through the high level commission. That time this questioning and the apprehension of the data was one of the key feature, because what I feel the first of all for this circular economy, the what you are indicating is the strategy. So the government or maybe the state governments are not visualizing that it can be it can have a very great potential if we can use the water and energy nexus and the electricity consumption and the withdrawal of groundwater, and how we can save the water through the circular economy. But they are not visualizing that circular economy pathways.
Right.
And thing is, when this tool was developed, I because I know 2016 to 2018, I know the kind of advances going on with the different state governments, and basically the UP. I must tell you the UP government. So what is the progress? Whether the state governments are using these tools to analyze the different planning and processes, number one, and number for other sectors you have talked. So what you are actually visualizing for the reallocation for other sectors? That is my question.
Okay. So in terms of that's completely true, and unless and until we have like city-wide numbers, it's often difficult to convince stakeholders about the importance of a particular structure. And we had tried to look at the Delhi case. Even then, it was quite difficult to get the numbers, but we tried to look at different sources to source the numbers for. So basically what I have seen in the Delhi case is like while the tariff charges they are using like they have their methods to calculate tariffs, they are not doing in fact this is something that also was reflected in Bangalore when we were discussing with other colleagues there, that they do not, the demand assessment for how much wastewater can actually be put to use is sort of absent. So that is one of the major loopholes right now in the system. So in terms of using the tools, we did get some positive responses from private companies about the tool, but not so much from government at that time. But they do have their own, systems in which they are actually calculating the tariffs. But in terms of the structure, definitely we are actually right now planning to do a case study on like we are doing a case study on the basis of this 2016 report, so that it at least places the issue with numbers. So that is my response to the first, the circular economy question. Now about reallocation of water, this is actually a project that we are doing with the World Bank. We recently concluded it, and it's the publication process. Here we are trying to look at how irrigation efficiency, improving irrigation efficiency, could actually save water use for irrigation. And in a BAU scenario, we saw that it's going to be a problem to supply water for the other sectors if the irrigation water use continues as usual and with the the BAU growths. So it's important to increasingly look at techniques like technical advances like drip, sprinkler, etc., and also financial incentives and mechanisms like pricing and other policy reforms actually for water use to reduce in the fields, which can be saved at that reservoir level and be transferred for domestic and industry use. So that's how we're looking at the reallocation structure. Of course, it's very complicated to say, to say the least, because it has overlaps of different elements like even to use reduce water, you need to have a system of audits, data collection at fields, right? You need to have some level of value put to that water. So it's going to be probably a long journey, but this report tries to emphasize that it is possible that we might have a water secured future if we just look at more efficient technologies for irrigation. And that is not to say that there will be the method that we did, the econometric method through which we calculated this, actually takes care of the output. So basically your output production in kilos is not going to be affected. It's just you are making tweaks when it comes to the technology and using as much as water you need instead of overuse. And like we all know, it's quite a complicated process for things to actually work out, but this report is trying to give a snapshot of the things that one should look at and the potential.
Okay, so thank you, because I know when you did your first report about the irrigation in Bihar, that was very comprehensive study. And in that study, you have gone into the grassroots community to interact. So because that was a very landmark study, I know I have referred also. And in the present context also, I think the more we interact with the community, we will get the feedback from the grassroots and the people who are actually beneficiary. But as you rightly pointed out, that the data data collection is a very difficult task, and data sets, especially when we are talking about the government, and especially I'm talking about the water sector, it's really tough, because there are always apprehensions involved, that why we are taking this data, and they are nobody is allowing that data. So one question related to this is, when the projects some of the projects are your independent projects, I know, but when there is a collaboration with the government, at that time also you are facing the problem of having the data from the government departments?
In terms of the minor irrigation report, or the Bihar one, I don't think there was problems to get data, because the irrigation department, the request came from there, so they were quite involved. But in the recent years, we have not directly worked with the government. The World Bank project, the recent one, actually we had struggled a lot to get. So the idea was to get farm level data to understand the water use, current water use. But of course, there is no data set which actually talks about farm level water use. So we had to look at developing a methodology in which we convert elements to water, right? Like, as in, there was the cost of cultivation data set actually was the basis of the study. So of course, like, when you have the buy-in of the government department from the very beginning, I think that still becomes easier to get data. But otherwise, no, we look at publicly available data sources mostly.
So for using the dashboard also, you have used the data available in the public domain?
So the dashboard, the tool that I'm talking about right now mostly is the irrigation, the circular economy tool. Yes, we looked at publicly available data sources, data only for elements like the capex, opex of different technologies. However, it was we were also aware that these numbers may not reflect. So these are CPCB numbers, but industry and we couldn't get the real numbers from the government at that time. So we used the numbers which were reported by the CPCB at that time, which seemed fine to us. But industry stakeholders actually said that these are underestimates. So even when we look at these data sources, we have to these disclaimers are there in our tool, that we expect someone to have a sense of what actually happening. I guess when you talk about the wastewater tool, right? I think information sources like private companies could also be helpful, and then looking at maybe DJB for the numbers. So even there, I think there are some issues with data sharing for sure. But in that case, we have to just depend on what CPCB reported. But for someone who is a utility and has the numbers, can change the numbers and feed in their own numbers. That's the flexibility that we wanted to keep there.
Okay. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Veena-ji. I think data deficit and data validation and access to data is three things that are very, very important when you put report like this. So fellows here, if we have any questions for the panelists, for the speakers, it'll be good to know what you think and what you want to know. So fine, looks like so yeah, I think this is fine. So can the important point that you want to cover and you want to kind of communicate to the fellows? Now they're almost coming to the closure of their fellowship, and they all are working on their reports. The data is definitely one of the issue, but the kind of the way you put things together in perspective using your tools, dashboard, and data is something that fellow have to really understand and use that in the report. So anything, any advice, any information that you would like to pass on to them?
So I think what C4Y and IWP's format on how you present the analysis is quite interesting. When I looked at the previous year's outputs, and the snapshot sort of communication of the study is, I think, very interesting. But it's so important for everyone to understand the importance of being able to put it in that snapshot. So I think that is something which the fellowship is doing very right in terms of communication, and that is something I really want the fellows to also concentrate. The CEF dashboard has been shared. Shuva has shared it in the meeting chat. You can have a look at it, how we try to present data. Also, I will share the Excel tool with you, and also the report when it comes out, the reallocation. So yeah, definitely.
That'll be really nice. And yeah, so Veena-ji, if you can just conclude, and Veena-ji, are you here?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of the program. Yeah.
So first of all, thanks. Yeah.
Shubha is there.
Battery the laptop battery has died, so apologies for that, she said. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so first of all, thank you, Shuva and Kangkanika, for really, I'm really happy that you have given a very, very thoughtful presentation, and you have shared your work, extensive work within the last 10 years. And this is all based on the own profiles and own strength that I know, because I know Arnaba and how sincerely they are working. And Suresh was part of our regional chair. So I know both the person very personally, very dynamic, and under these dynamic leadership, you all are working. That is a great initiative you people are doing. And I'm also very, very happy that CEEW is part of our this endeavor, and our fellows were placed. And I know the very first day when we had a meeting with you, you came up with so many questions, and I think when a person asks many questions, that is a very, very good approach, because you want to understand, and we also want to understand how the synergy can be built up.
Yeah.
We are also, learning in this process. We also started this fellowship with a very modest beginning, and Alka and myself both are working from our core strength and initiatives, and we feel that the many organizations are now going to be part of this initiative. And what I feel is, the fellows, especially for this cohort, are really doing great work, and they are taking lot of hardship to understand the right kind of work going in the water sector. I think that is very, very important, because if you are doing your masters, you are not exposed to all these things. But because of the part of this fellowship, and because the part of this fellowship nature, and the kind of the program design, due to the COVID, it has modified. I think it has given us a leverage to know the strength of the organization where these fellows have been working, as well as the fellows have also learned so many new things because of these webinars. So I think that is a very, very big takeaway from this whole fellowship program. And I feel that because now we are thinking for the larger involvement of youth in the program, and it is not only 10 or 15, we are thinking, and how we can leverage the institutional support from other organizations. That is the going on. But I will request all the fellows who are part of this initiative to be connected with India Water Partnership, because this is the platform which is going to give them the leverage. We are not taking anything for us. It is in the public domain. Whatever new opportunities are coming, new knowledge are coming, we are going to share with all of you, and you will be part of this initiative wherever you go, wherever you join, whatever field you opt, but the water will be in the central domain. So that is my takeaway, and I'm thankful to Alka, Sanjay, and the team of
Veenaji's network
time
again.
energy. So thank you so much, Alka.
Thank you, Veenaji. Thank you. Thank you. I think you've elaborated the entire process, and thank you very much for taking us back to the journey, that why we started this fellowship. And yes, so fellows, we are going to conclude this webinar series, and this 6 webinars that we had with all the partners was really insightful, and we're very, very delighted that we could organize it because of the virtual nature of the entire program, and we could get all connected to understand the different strategies and the strength partners are offering. And CEEW coming here for the first time for the fellowship, and but the kind of value that you're bringing into the fellowship is really immense. And today's presentation has really strengthened my belief that we are going in right direction in bringing the right partners all together for the fellowship. Now the fellows, for all of you, now this is over, final report is due, and we're going to all work together to get really good documents out of it that you can use it in fact later. And then in November we're going to have peer reviews, peer review of what you have learned all together. So we're going to decide a date so that you come and share the way partners are sharing now on the different learnings that you had over this 6-month process. So this is very important. We will be coming back with more information. We're sending you a mail on asking your, we have to issue certificates, stipend, and all other t-shirts and everything. So we'll be coming out with all housekeeping and announcements also in due course of time. But today, with all the last section of this series, both of you, thank you very much. And Avinash has been a part of the entire thing, and this is we just please convey our regards and kind of to him also. So thank you very much, all of you. And we look forward to your presentation and plus whatever you can share with the fellows altogether.
Sure, sure.
And thank you for contributing at great length in the learning of the fellows.
Sure.
Thank you very
so
much. Thank you, Veena ji. Thank you, all the fellows. Thank you, Shuva, and thank you, Kangkanika.
Glad to be your part. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All the best.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you, Veena.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Alka.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.